Paper Hand Grenades. I'm your host, Joshua Solomon, and with me, as always, is JP Marzullo. How you doing, JP?
Doing good. Doing good.
Yeah. So this will be our second show in the new studio.
Yep.
I can see from the feed that we got much better cameras. It looks. I think it's clear.
Makes me look younger. That's the important thing.
It makes me look older. It's focusing on my wrinkles. Tonight, JP, we have. I'm going to do the. Okay. As always, Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades is sponsored by the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, wilsonhillpistol.org. You should see that on your screen if you're watching it over the internet. You can go there and you can get the training schedule. First Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. is an open meeting. All new members or prospective members, you can come to there, and let's very quickly take a look at the training schedule. The next thing on the schedule looks like March 9th, and it looks like Defensive Handgun 1, which is a not an advanced class, but it's not the beginner class. It's kind of a starter. It's an intermediate, for experts. So that's on the 9th, and I know that on March 30th, and you can sign up through the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, but on March 30th, there's a class that I'll be taking, and that's a range safety officer class. That class will be given at the Londonderry fishing game, but it will be taught by a Wilson Hill pistol instructor. So, nice. And while we're on the subject, tonight's guest is a former president of Wilson Hill Pistol Club, as well as a current board member, Mr. Vince McHugh. How you doing, Vince?
Good, Josh. Thanks for having me. Hey, JP,
Thanks
how are you?
So, all right.
So we like to do, the club sponsors the show, and we like to do a club show a couple of times a year, and we talk about Second Amendment stuff, talk about club stuff, talk about, and I understand you have something specific you want to talk about.
Sure. So every once in a while, or at least a couple times a year, we like to do an event called Try It Before You Buy It. And what that is you get to come down to the club. The members will bring in their favorite handguns, in this case specifically for defensive type handguns. And so you'll have everything from 9mm. People argue about 380s and 22s, but there'll be some of those there too that people can try. They can actually shoot in a safe environment. We'll have safety instructors. We'll have people kind of walk you out to the range. Ammunition will stay on the range. There'll be guns you can look at and handle that won't be loaded, so that you can get a feel for them. And it's a great service to the community. If you're thinking about buying a defensive handgun or even any handgun, you go into a lot of stores, they won't even let you pick it up for the most part, or you can look at it, but you can't try the trigger to see if it's hard.
Compare it to something else
exactly.
Without putting one away and taking it.
Yeah.
My experience with buying firearms in a store, especially big box stores or even some mom and pop gun stores, is they're interested in selling you a firearm, right? It's a sales pitch. And I happen to be in the store with my father and my sister and my brother-in-law, and she's looking around, and she knows that she's handled a 380 EZ, a Smith & Wesson 380 EZ.
Great gun for someone.
It's a great gun for someone with small hands, and my sister does have small hands, and it's got a very easy slide.
Right.
And she just wanted to try it because she heard about it, and they're like, "Oh, we don't have any in stock, but here, you should try this," and they start pushing something, anything,
because they want to sell
in an attempt to make a sale.
Right.
And Wilson Hill, we've done this a few times.
Right.
Is this try it before you buy it? Where I think the last time I went, there must have been 150 guns.
Easy, yeah.
And they were all different types, right? There weren't duplicates, right? And so what we do is we ask our membership to volunteer.
Exactly.
And so, but you don't just go in there and it's not just a free-for-all, right?
Right, exactly.
The member who brings his guns and volunteers, he's the expert in, he or she is the expert in that particular firearm or firearms that they brought. And so they're there to say, hey, this is what this is. This is what this is.
Right.
This is how, and you have the opportunity to get familiar with it. We have range officers and we
Right.
have instructors there
Absolutely.
that can help you understand whether or not this is right for you.
Yeah.
And then you can go to the store.
You know, the same thing happened to my daughter. She went out to buy a pistol, and I think she wanted to do it on her own because, you know, she didn't want Dad to help her out on this one. So she went out and she bought it, and she came back and said, hey, Dad, I bought a pistol. I said, what'd you buy? She goes, I don't know, it's purple. I said, okay. It turned out to be a Ruger LCP,
Okay.
and very difficult trigger pull for her. She really struggled with
You know,
it.
people don't think about that.
She couldn't even pick it. They wouldn't even let her try the trigger because she went to a box store.
Right,
wow.
and because
And they saw
you
it
know,
coming.
there's, you know, if you're not intimately familiar with the workings of a pistol or any firearm, when you pull the trigger, you are putting stress on the spring, and you are putting stress on the firing pin.
Right.
And it's generally frowned upon to do that very often, and that's probably why
I get that.
they get that. But at the same time, there are ways to alleviate that
Sure.
with snap caps and
Right,
stuff.
exactly.
So you get these blanks that have a little rubber pad where the primer would be, and that little rubber pad acts as a little stop.
Shock absorber for
it's a
the-
shock
for the
absorber
firing
for the
pin.
firing pin, and you don't have those problems
Right.
that the box
Right.
store folks are.
And we do these events for that very reason. We don't want someone walking in and they like the color of a gun. And manufacturers do this on purpose sometimes. They'll put a gun out and they'll kind of aim it towards a particular, you know, demographic. And so they come home, and when I took her out to shoot it, her hands would just shake shooting that gun, which is never a good thing. So we had to try a pistol that I have. I have an M&P, not the Shield, but I mean I have the Shield, not the EZ, but I have a M&P Shield, and she shot that and was good. And so we eventually went and found the used one of those that she shoots much better.
Yeah.
So you know she's going to sell the other one, but for now she has a gun that she can handle and is comfortable for her.
Yeah.
Which is important.
You know, and it's even experienced gun owners make those mistakes. So I have a friend who is ex-military. He has several firearms, and he bought a firearm for his wife, and he bought it so that it would be simple, so that it would just work,
Right.
and it was a revolver,
Revolver,
Yep.
sure.
but it happened to be a 357.
Oh,
Oh, jeez.
yeah. Yeah.
And
Load it with 38 at least. Give her a break.
We went to the range, and so he and his wife and me and my wife and we had the ladies try it. And,
Oh my! With a 357 load.
and no, we had 380 or 38s.
Okay, okay.
So he had like 2 boxes of 357,
Right.
and he had a box of 38, and he and I each tried one of each, and said, "No, this is not going to work." Right?
Really?
And she was convinced that this was going to be fine. You know,
Right.
she'd never really fired a gun before. You know, she's like, "Well, it'll just go, right?" And we're like, "Yeah, it'll
Yes,
just
relatively
go."
speaking.
But you know,
look like
if
a
you don't have
cannon going.
some semblance of
Right.
control, you're still not going to hit the intruder that's 10 feet in front of you.
Right. Right.
And so it was just brutal. And then on another day, we went to the range specifically to get rid of the 357. So he and I took turns with the pistol
Right.
to get rid of the 357 rounds.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
by the end, our wrists were just, and
I have one.
you know, so
Yeah.
even an experienced shooter is going to encounter firearms that not necessarily that you can't handle, but just aren't good for self-defense, right? I mean, a 357 is I mean, it's
a lot of-
it's a lot.
It's a
right?
lot, and it can go through what you're intending to shoot.
Exactly, and that gets us to the topic of different types of ammo.
Sure.
It's important to understand these things, and that's what Wilson Hill exists for. is to
Exactly.
help with all of that.
Right, and there'll be people there talking about ammunition as well. Typically, defensive ammunition is hollow point ammunition, or it's hollow point filled with a plastic substance to make it penetrate the initial layer of clothing. The goal is to get it to open up and stay in what you hit. That's the idea. That's the best situation, especially if you're in like an apartment building. You don't want bullets going through the walls. It's not
Right.
good for you. It's definitely not good for your neighbors, and you're responsible for that bullet when it leaves the gun, wherever it ends up. So you have to know what you're shooting at and what's beyond. In an apartment, that's a difficult situation.
Right, right.
So, one of the things I found as you get older, I can't pull a slide back on my,
Sure.
Glock 19.
Yeah.
I just can't do it. I
Right.
don't have this, can't grip
Yep.
it properly.
Understood. Yeah.
So I guess there's a couple that have like an easy pull.
The easy one is great.
That's the easy
But I didn't
slide.
get
So
a
my
chance-
wife's got one.
I didn't get a
Yeah.
chance to try it.
It's probably going to be at the. We'll ask to see if somebody
May
could
have
bring
some.
one, because we like to have that gun around, because that's a very popular gun.
Yeah.
For that reason.
I think we had a couple
Right.
EZs last time
We
around.
did? Okay.
Because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
brought mine. And
Okay.
I know,
Oh,
you have one?
I know. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We can
Well,
probably get
it's
Josh
my
to bring
wife's.
his.
Yeah,
right, so-
But there's another way to get around that too. There's a model called the Tomcat.
Yeah, I know what a Tomcat
which
is,
you'll
sure.
pop open.
Yep.
Right,
Oh,
so you
it's
don't have to.
Yep.
The reason you have to rack the slide initially, for people who don't know a lot about firearms, is you have a magazine full of bullets. You rack the slide to load the first one,
Right.
and then that gun is ready. Ready to be shot in whatever situation you're in. With the Tomcat, you can put in your magazine, pop open the barrel, put the initial one in the barrel, close it. It's now in the same condition as if you racked the slide. It's ready to be fired.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen the Tomcat. I don't know why.
There's a couple. I think Tomcat's one of them.
Yeah.
But
Tomcat.
you would think that someone like me would be up to date on that. But so I understand the breech loading, right?
Yep.
Yep.
But once you slide that thing shut, is there still a
No, you're literally ready to fire it.
oh, no. But
How do
when
you
you pull the trigger, how does it cycle to the next one? Is there a slide?
Once it fires, it causes the cycle.
All right, so it does cycle like a normal
Yes.
semi-automatic.
It's just to get the first one loaded into the breech, so that
Now-
you don't have to rack the
it's
slide.
just size,
do you
too.
have to do it that way, or
No.
can it be racked
No,
to get
you
the
can
first
rack a
one in?
slide as well, I believe.
I'm not sure of that.
I believe
That'd be
because it's
interesting
going
if you
to
were
load the
able
next
to do
one.
both,
Yeah.
then that
Right.
makes it easier for
Right.
someone who's got arthritis and whatnot. Unfortunately,
I'm sure it was
I'm
designed
starting.
for that reason, because
Yes.
as I get older, I keep hoping I don't hit that day when I can't rack a slide.
Yeah,
Right.
But I run into that where I'm thinking someday that's probably going to be reality for me. I'll probably go to an EZ, since that's a gun it's different, slightly different than the Shield. It's not quite.
Is it easy a Ruger or?
No,
what
it's
is
Smith & Wesson.
Oh, it is a Smith &
Yeah,
Wesson.
Smith & Wesson.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that.
They make it in the
9
380 and the 9.
Right.
Okay.
So you have your choice there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's important to have a gun that you're comfortable with, that you're knowledgeable about, that you can control. Because in a situation where, a self-defense situation, being able to control that firearm and keep it, aimed at what you want it to aim at is very important. You don't want to be in a situation where bullets are going where you don't want them to go.
Sure.
And that takes practice as well. Being able to consistently put bullets on target in multiple situations is the goal of a good shooter.
Yeah, and that's what defensive handgun starts to teach you, right? We got the basic classes that I read off all the time that we have like once a month, I think at least, is get familiar with the firearm and learn how to be safe with it.
Right.
The beginner classes are just about learning how to be safe. Then it's about putting your bullets on the target, like
Right,
you said,
right.
and it's not about accuracy. It's not about John Wick and
No,
and
that's crazy.
right? Because that doesn't happen, right? What we do is we try to hit center mass. So if you pretend that you're shooting at this piece of paper,
Right.
anywhere on this piece of paper is going to knock me on my butt.
Right.
Right.
And that's the goal.
That's center
To
mass.
stop
That's the
an
goal.
attacker.
You don't have to get a grouping, a 2-inch grouping here to put me down.
No.
Right. You need to.
Yeah.
The goal is to stop the threat, and when the threat is stopped, when the threat is on the ground and the threat doesn't have a weapon in
Stop
their hand
shooting.
anymore, it's time for you to stop.
Right, exactly.
You
You've
don't.
accomplished.
It's not time for the one-liners and the,
Right.
It's time to
Right.
stop.
Right, absolutely. And, good.
No, I was just going to ask you. No, finish what you're going to say. I have a question.
No, I was thinking the same thing. I usually think in terms of a pie plate.
Yeah.
Something like that. If I'm shooting, I'm not looking for that tiny, tiny group. I'm looking for something in this general area. And we always say from here to here. In the movies, they say, oh, shoot to kill. You never hear a defensive handgun use that phrase. They shoot
Right.
to stop.
Right.
You're not looking to kill anybody. You're looking to stop someone who has bad intentions. And once that's accomplished, at that point, you're safe and you can call the police and
Right.
do whatever
right.
you need. Call the
and
ambulance.
center mass, right?
Right.
I teach new people. They'll come with me, and I'll show them the range, and I'll tell them they need to go see a real instructor after this. But they get frustrated because they're not grouping it the way that I
Understood.
group it.
Understood.
Right?
How long have you been shooting?
Well, I've been shooting for decades.
Right.
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 But they get frustrated, and I explain to them. I say, well, you hit the paper.
That's
right?
pretty good.
You hit the paper at 50 feet.
Right.
Right, whoever was threatening you is no longer a threat.
Right.
Right, and that's the key. So anytime
Sure.
I leave the range, there are days that I leave frustrated. That wasn't my best, but I had practiced.
Right.
and I'm my
That's why we practice,
it's on
right?
point,
'Cause-
right?
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah, I definitely understand that, and that's why we practice. Regular practice keeps you accurate, keeps you safe, handling your firearm, and 50 feet is a fairly long way. Most gunfights, I'm told, statistically happen between 3 to 5 feet.
yeah, it's
That's not
7 to 10 yards.
7 to 10 yards
is 30 feet.
Yeah.
Right, and 7 yards is 20
Actually, so
feet.
some of the stuff I read, I think it's even closer than that. So.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not unusual to place a target. And in the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, we have these freestanding target stands now. So you can stay behind the line when you shoot, but you can set your target up at 10 feet if that's what you're most comfortable with. And for a beginner, that's not a terrible thing. I've seen a lady recently that we took to shoot, maybe her first time shooting, and at 50 feet, she was really struggling to hit paper. But at 10 feet, she was pretty damn accurate.
Right.
So, get
And
used
that's
to that.
what's going to happen
Right.
inside your home.
Most likely,
if you're in a
yes.
home defense situation, you're going to be within feet.
Yeah, generally speaking,
right?
that's true.
We're not all rich. We don't have these huge mansions with hallways that extend the length
This
of a
is true.
football field,
Yeah, this
right?
is true.
You think of the longest hallway in your house, and that's the longest distance you'll ever have to defend yourself inside your own home.
Yeah, generally speaking, that's true.
So, what was I going to say? I was going to bring something else up. Oh, you mentioned that she was frustrated at
Yeah,
50 feet.
she was.
And that's dangerous for, it's dangerous because if someone gets frustrated, then they're not going to come back and practice.
Right.
They're going to give up. And if
Right.
they give up,
It's the reason I brought it up.
it becomes a problem.
From 50
right?
to
So
10.
you bring it in, get them comfortable,
Right.
get them, okay, I understand
Right.
the basics, right? And then there are theories, there are different ways
Sure.
to hold your hands, there's different ways
Exactly.
to put your feet. That's when you start
sight
getting
picture,
into
all of
those
that stuff.
things.
Right,
You
exactly.
start getting into those things after they're comfortable with the safety and the basics.
It changed her night when I brought her in to 10 feet and had her shoot another 5 rounds, and she hit fairly accurately in center mass. It changed her whole, attitude towards the night because she was frustrated. She realized she could do this. She just needed some more practice.
Right.
So typically, when we start new members, part of it is qualifications. And qualification means you take the largest caliber you're going to shoot at the club, and you're able to hit 9 out of 10 rounds on a FBI-style target, the ball and pin style.
A very large target at 50 feet.
Right.
So
And
we're not asking every member to do
No,
a
no,
group.
no.
We're asking you to
Hit the-
be
hit
able
the
to be
paper.
safe enough to hit this gigantic target.
And the 10th one can't go anywhere, like in the roof or in the floor.
Right.
those are things.
We don't want them going that way.
And we'll usually have them reload midway through just to make sure that when they handle the gun, The number one safety rule is keep the barrel pointed in a safe direction at all times. In the club, downrange towards the steel backstop, that's a safe direction. So when people reload, we watch. Do they turn it and they facing the guy next to them?
Right. Are
Or
they
does it
paying attention
always,
to what's going
right,
on?
Right,
or
right,
are they,
right.
Are they
Do they
letting
turn their body and keep the firearm aimed downrange? We teach that.
Yeah, it becomes second nature after a while. Like if
It does.
you spend enough time on the range, you'll it's like any other social activity. You want to chit chat with the people
Right.
next to you and the people behind you, but it becomes second nature that you
Right.
you
Exactly.
keep your hand never moves.
Exactly. But
right?
it
It's-
wasn't second nature
right.
when you started. In fact,
Right. No.
we do
absolutely
everything
not.
wrong when we start.
I've been yelled at plenty of times, and I almost got divorced a couple of
Oh,
times
you were the instructor for your.
because when I am an instructor for my
Yeah.
wife, and I warn her every time. So we're going to go shooting,
Right.
and I'm not going to be nice when I see something bad, right? And so that voice comes out.
Sure.
And it gets to her, and I know it does, but that's the same voice that got to me,
Sure.
right? Shooting with my dad, shooting with the
Right,
instructors at
right.
Maine Maritime Academy.
Sure.
Right? The instructors they are just not going to be nice to you if
Not
you
when
break a
safety's
rule.
involved.
Exactly,
Right,
and that's what I
safety's
tell her.
first.
is, I'm going to be a different person on the
Right,
range
right.
than I am at home. And
Right.
we're going to have to get over it when we leave the range.
And the
like
single.
I said, I almost got divorced, but anyway.
Yeah, that's why we have somebody else teach us about.
Yeah, and that's what I told her last time. I said, I'm
Smart.
done. You're going to take the
There
classes.
you go. There you go. One of the number one things I see over and over again is when someone reaches for a pistol, they put their finger on the trigger, and that's like one of the. We tell them your finger's paralyzed until it's on target, and then you can put your finger
Yeah,
on the trigger.
that one is a big one for me. That is. Well, it's probably the biggest one for
Because
me,
it's most likely
right?
to cause an
Because
accidental discharge.
even if you accidentally broke any of the other rules, if your finger's not on the trigger,
Right.
You're okay.
we're still gonna-
Generally speaking, you're
right.
not going to. Right.
So
Well, yeah.
So there's been questions about, how long do you keep your rounds in a magazine?
Yeah, I've heard
Is
people.
it spring?
Right.
I mean,
They're designed to store rounds in them. They really are. I've heard old timers say you should take them out. You should relax the springs. I don't think I've ever had a magazine have a spring failure like that. Maybe if it's more than 50 to 75 years old, maybe it would be a problem. Maybe if you have some World War II stuff now, might be. But there are guns out there, World War II guns, that are still functioning fine, and I just have never had a problem with it. A modern spring today is just a work of engineering, and they are meant to function compressed for very long periods of time.
and so the other question I would have, pardon me, is do you have classes on how to clean your firearms? Or,
That's a good question. You know what? That's a great question. You know what? I don't think the basic pistol office they don't go over how to clean your firearm.
Because I have, my Glock, there's little tiny springs.
Right.
And even in my 22, that's a Ruger, the tiny springs. And if you take it apart,
If you have the
And-
Ruger, I had to go on YouTube to get it back together.
No,
so
absolutely.
That little-
the
yes,
one that
exactly.
flips out and that one.
That
it
is
is.
like everybody who's ever cleaned the firearm. If they clean that gun,
Yeah, that's-
you bring it back
that
to the
one is-
gunsmith, bag o' parts. and
Absolutely.
you put this back together.
That one's a very
Exactly.
difficult one. I have to reteach myself every
I
time.
go on YouTube.
That's
Yep,
the one
I do
that I
as well.
use.
Yeah.
I bought that one for the pistol league, for the 22 league.
Sure.
It's a 22.
Yeah, have
but
the bull barrel.
It would be, it'd be nice if you could do that.
You know what? We should think
because-
about doing that even as a like an event like this,
Yeah.
where
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
cleaning a
Yeah.
pistol and have several types of pistols and
Yep.
how to clean them.
I mean, I would do that. I mean, I wouldn't teach them. I would come and see how
Yeah.
it's done. I mean,
I think the Women's Defense League has
They used-
a gun cleaning
I don't know whether
day
they
that
still
they
do.
used.
They used to.
They used to
Yeah,
gather.
It's not a bad
for-
idea.
for
We
a
should
gun
make a note of
cleaning
that.
day.
Maybe do something like that. I like doing things that are a service to the gun community,
Yeah,
because
and that-
Wilson Hill
Come in
exists.
and we all do this. And hey,
Yeah.
how do you clean your gun? Well,
Yeah,
here's how I
that's-
do mine.
And what do you use? I mean, just hops,
Right.
or do you use
Well,
a
I tend,
spray? I mean,
yeah, I have a
those are the
couple of things. I have some
questions, right?
Crud Buster that I tend to like.
Yep.
I have hops. What's the other one? The green can that something solid I'll use from time to time, but I
Yeah.
use that mostly on black powder. It's meant for that.
Yeah, yeah. So like I have a Ruger Breakdown 22.
Yep.
We break the, you can take it
Yeah.
apart. That's great because it's easy to clean. You
Right.
you have it apart,
Right.
and you're in pretty good shape.
Right.
And you were mentioning small pistols before, like a Kel-Tec 3.8.
That's a great
That's what
example
I
of
have.
a subcompact
That's what
concealed carry.
Yeah, that's. I mean,
Right.
you have to learn how to shoot it.
And you have to learn to clean it, because if you don't keep it clean, it's not going to keep you safe.
Exactly. But it's no bigger than your wallet.
But we're talking about doing different sessions with full size, like home defense pistols,
Yep.
compact for concealed carry pistols, and
Yep.
subcompact for pocket carry.
Yes.
So you just mentioned the Kel-Tec. I have a Diamondback 9mm.
Okay.
Smallest pistol in 9 that I've seen.
That's
Painful to shoot.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
They
the
are-
smaller, the more painful.
Yeah,
Painful
they
to
are.
shoot.
That's
Actually, I've also seen, I've had some small ones where if you didn't have a good, strong grip on it, you'll get a jam, because it uses the weight of your hand as part of the
That's
mechanism.
interesting.
I actually encountered that. I was shooting with my buddy Gene, and these two ladies came in to use the club, and they used the lanes next to us, and they were getting frustrated,
Yeah.
and they were getting jams.
Limp wrist.
And
Yeah.
and so I stopped everybody on the range, and I went over and I said, I think your problem is
You're not gripping it hard
you're
enough.
not gripping it hard enough. You're letting your wrist.
move with it.
Right? And
I've seen that
we call
cause a
it-
jam.
We call it limp wrist.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they just could not conceive that I was anywhere near correct. And I said, try it.
Try
I
it.
said,
Really
"You just-"
tight grip.
Because what that they originally
It's an
said,
easy
here, you
fix.
try this. Tell me if there's anything wrong with it. And I go bang, 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 bang. There's nothing wrong with
Right.
your gun.
Right.
And then she
Which
goes,
frustrates them even more.
she fires it once, and it gets
Right.
the
It's the same.
stovepipe.
Right.
And so I told her, I said, you need to stiffen that wrist up.
Right.
And as soon as she did, her whole world opened up.
Yeah.
Right.
She thought she had the wrong gun. She thought
No.
that she bought the wrong gun.
She
but
needs
she needed somebody to show her.
Right.
And that's
But that's what the club
underscores-
exists for.
underscores
that's
why
great.
you have a
I mean,
club
that's-
Right.
and why we have classes.
Right,
And why
exactly.
we push the
Right.
classes so hard.
Right.
So do you also do like drawing from holsters, whether it's a cross?
Not in the
holster?
club. Well, let me say this. There are certain classes where we never do a cross draw, because you would sweep.
We don't do
How about-
cross draw
how about
because
from your hip?
So
when you do a cross draw, you're sweeping everybody
Literally.
on that side of you.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
get
a
it.
no. But if you have one on your hip, there are certain classes in like advanced defense handgun,
So-
like you'll have not an engineer, but you have a safety officer behind each person,
Right.
so that while they're
won't do
drawing,
that.
and if there's anything unsafe, you'll hold an immediate ceasefire.
Yeah. So that started with defensive handgun too. So
Right.
I did do defensive
Yeah,
handgun
me
too.
too. No, I did a different one. I did
And,
advanced handgun techniques.
And so we had the line, and we were in front of the line, because it's a special class,
Right.
and they got the timer, and they right, and then okay, you're ready to draw, and so they're teaching you how to draw, keep your hand
Right.
out of the way, because you don't want to draw and then sweep
your
your
hand.
own
Shoot your
hand, because you'll blow a hole through your own
Yeah.
hand. So you
Shoot your
got to
fingers
keep your
off.
hand up, and then your hand catches
Right.
You gotta
like
catch
that. But I had an incident, and I just stopped, right? It was a timed drill, and I went to draw, and as I drew, my thumb caught my shirt,
Oh, wow.
right? And my thumb caught my shirt, and as that was happening, I
Dropped it.
instinctively gripped, and my finger went inside the
Trigger.
Wow.
trigger guard,
Right.
but I didn't pull the trigger.
Right.
But
And
I
you knew at that
recognized
point it was
I
dangerous.
recognized it, and then I just stopped and raised my hand.
Yeah,
I said, "I'm
yeah.
done."
Right.
That
But that's great. You
that
knew
was
enough
a bad
to do that.
draw.
Right,
now,
right.
in a self-defense
You would've kept
situation,
going.
I would have kept going. But I knew that there were people around me,
Sure.
and that I had a bad draw, which
Right.
again underscores why the advanced classes are important.
Very much so.
Because you start to realize your own limitations.
Right.
Right? Okay, so now I know that might be an issue depending
Right.
on the clothing I'm wearing
Absolutely.
in a situation.
So-
right? It's you learn things
Sure.
in
Yeah, I
these
think
classes.
about yourself too.
Exactly.
I think as you get older, it becomes more difficult to do this, to
Agreed.
draw back from
Yeah,
there.
agreed.
And so when I used to fly a lot back in the day when it wasn't bad, you could.
You do appendix carry.
I did.
Okay.
yeah.
I'm a little big around there. If I lose a few more pounds, I might be able to do.
Well,
appendix
you're right,
carry.
though. Yeah, it has
Yeah.
to do with the size of you,
Right,
too, right?
right.
But
You got to find what's comfortable for you.
yeah, I noticed as I got older, though, even a Ruger 350 revolver was too
Right.
heavy for me.
Right.
If I hold it up, and it's a
Right.
double.
Right.
Well, these small pocket, I mean, I have a Kel-Tec 380 as well,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a fine gun.
It is. I
You got
also
to shoot it a lot, though.
yeah, no, yeah.
Because it's a small barrel,
Yes,
so
right.
for
It's a
accuracy.
very short barrel,
Right.
and you have to keep it in your head. This is a defense weapon. This
Right.
is not a
Right.
competition or accuracy
So
weapon.
another question I had that people ask me all the time, if you're going to shoot, you typically do it this way, right? I mean, you're shooting this way, but it would seem to me that you want to make a smaller target of yourself.
I get what you're saying.
So to
Yeah.
shoot
Keep
this
it on
way to me
angles.
makes more sense than the square way.
So we don't
and
tell
fire.
people how they have to shoot.
No, I'm just curious,
But
though.
typically, I always start in a good athletic position. A good athletic position is my feet about shoulder length apart, my knees over my toes, my shoulders over
Right.
my knees, leaning forward slightly. Everybody, when they first start shooting,
Yeah, you
they
see
want to
them.
do this because
You
that's a
see 'em.
movement.
Yeah, no, I
Their-
agree.
Their shoulders
You know,
are like this.
And you say, lean
And
in, don't lean
and
back. Right.
And I got to
right.
tell them, I want to be leaned into
Right.
it.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
I want my head forward
Right.
like this. And that's when you got all that control. You got all that control
Sure.
in your elbows.
And then there's the weaver stance, which is slightly one foot in front of another.
what you're
There's
Which I'm
modified
talking
weaver.
about,
Yeah, you're talking about the weaver.
And then there's literally a single. When you've shot a bunch, it's recommended that you spend some time shooting single-handed and off-handing, meaning the hand you don't normally shoot with.
Yep.
Because in a
Get hit.
self-defense situation, if I lose that hand,
Yep.
I've got to be able to get to the pistol and be able to still shoot it.
That's a good
so
point.
being able to do it
Yeah.
with both hands is important,
Yep.
and single-handedly.
And we do some of that at the end of handgun 2, but handgun 3 starts getting into that.
It's great.
So
Great. You learn stuff too. When you're timed, it puts you under stress.
Exactly.
And you behave differently under stress. They say that your best day at the range, your worst day at the range isn't as bad as being under a stressful situation. So whatever you train to where you can do it over and over again, and you just do it by almost Zen-like.
Right.
That's what you're going to do in a situation like. But even in that, that stress can cause
Yep.
problems like you just described.
the most stressful class I took was the low light class.
Oh,
And that was lights off.
Sure.
And we would leave the range, and the instructor and the
Oh, wow.
assistant would set things up
wow.
Wow,
on
that's
the
pretty
range.
interesting.
He would set up targets. Some targets were innocents, and some targets were bad
Right.
guys. And then there would be strobe lights in different spots. And you'd go into the range, lights out, and he'd place you.
Right.
And you'd have somebody behind you, and
Safety
a
officer.
safety officer
Right.
standing behind you, and then the timer would go off, and you'd get strobe lights from behind you, and you'd get strobe lights in your, your eyes are in the dark. You have to
Struggling, right.
adjust.
So
and
they're
you're
wide
struggling.
open.
And so that was a very stressful class.
I bet.
Because now, do I see a bad guy on that target, or do I see a good guy on that
So it's
target?
like Men in
Right.
Black, right? When they were.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
No,
it was,
seriously,
it
right?
was kind of like that.
Do you shoot the good one or the bad
But
one?
at the end of that class, I was just, my heart was pounding.
It's
right?
stressful.
And it teaches you what stress is
Right.
in that type of situation with a firearm in your
Which
hand.
is great.
But it's still nowhere near what a
No.
real situation is. But at least
Nobody's shooting back at you.
right. But at least you're starting to understand. Okay,
Right.
stress changes the
Right.
way I
Absolutely.
act.
Absolutely.
It changes my decision-making
Yeah.
process. It changes what I think I see.
Exactly. And sometimes what you see is not what you think, just like you said.
Oh, did you see that
I've been in
police
it.
officer? You see the video of that police officer? It was a week ago or so, but they released the video. He had shown up to a domestic situation.
This guy, was he shot?
He showed up to a domestic situation. He took the boyfriend, handcuffed him, put him in the back of his cruiser. So now we have a suspect in the back of a cruiser, handcuffed, cruiser's locked. He goes back in and he's talking with somebody, and now he's walking back to the cruiser, And this is all from his video cam, his
Yeah.
body cam. You hear a thump, right?
I think I saw
And
it.
he immediately falls to the ground. I've been hit, I've been hit, I've been hit. And he rolls over, pulls out his gun, and he empties his mag into the back of his cruiser because he thought
He was shot.
that this handcuffed guy in the back of the cruiser
Had a gun.
had a gun somehow
Yeah.
and had shot him. But he wasn't shot. The police officer, all he heard was an acorn dropping and hitting the roof of his car. He emptied his mag.
It's
at
the
an
most stressful,
unarmed-
yeah.
At an unarmed, handcuffed person in the back of his own
He's
police
going to jail.
squad. So he's
Wow,
no longer a
unfortunate.
police officer.
Yeah.
But that guy, he laid down and he was fine.
Oh,
but
God,
he's covered
praise
in
God
glass.
for that. Yeah.
But
that's
he had no idea what was going on. Can you imagine?
No, I don't
Can
think I
you-
could.
Can you imagine? But that's that situation where
It's the most likely time a
He-
police officer is going to get shot is in a domestic.
exactly
Yeah,
he was
absolutely.
stressed out because
Right.
he was dealing with a screaming girlfriend and a screaming
Right.
boyfriend, and then this sound that he heard that he thought he recognized as a gunshot,
Right.
and it just set him off,
Stre-
right? And you're like I
Stress.
said, you think you see things that you don't
Right.
see. You
Right.
think and you have to understand that about yourself.
Right, right. Anybody who's ever hunted deer has had buck fever, where you think you see a rack, and as the sun comes up, it's a tree.
Right.
You know, but in your mind, that was the biggest deer you've ever seen
Right.
until the sun changes. You know, and yeah,
it's,
so
it's still the biggest deer I ever saw. The next time I talked to my buddy.
yeah. So that's a whole nother story.
And when he said, yeah, did you get one yet? I mean, that's the
No, he got
famous
away.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have another question
Sure.
for you. I've when we've been on a show, he's told me when the courses are and everything.
Yeah.
I can't suggest this to you, but the problem I would have is they're always on Sunday. I'm in church on Sunday.
Yeah,
so
you
have
both. I get it.
Yeah, so it's difficult. I mean, I would love to take some of these courses, but
We had one on a
yeah,
Wednesday
there was a
between Christmas and New Year's.
Saturday
But
and
of course,
a
that's
Wednesday.
Christmas and New Year's. Come on, my
Well, the
birthday's
thing is,
the
our
22nd.
our
Give me a break.
instructors work too, so,
No, I
you know,
understand.
that's-
No, I
that's kind of the-
understand that.
that's-
I
that's-
understand
It's something
that
we can
completely.
ask about too, though. If somebody has the time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, if some-
sometimes they've done them on
I think maybe
two Saturdays in
Bob
a row.
DeMille might be able to
Bob
do it.
might be able to do it,
he's-
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you had somebody that people,
Yeah.
not necessarily me, but people have asked me that as well.
Yeah.
After the show, they said,
You know,
"Well,
I
it's
get
on
it.
Sundays. Why
It's-
can't you
you
do
got
it
a
another
commitment."
day?" I said, "I don't
Right.
really know. It's probably because people work the rest of the time."
Right.
So that's
But I'll make a note of that. That's something worth looking at.
You know, we got enough instructors that are regular instructors at the club. We could probably propose something like that where they rotate. Like you get one instructor does a midweek class
and again, you might not get anybody but people
once
my
a
age
quarter,
there,
right?
You know.
And so-
No, I think you're
you know-
going to find people in similar situations because, you know, it's one of those things. Sunday, it's not a day. A lot of people, you know, if you're
Right.
committed to a church,
Right.
you're usually fairly active.
Right.
Now, from time to time, I can take a day off if I say, look, I got something I got to do,
Sure.
so I'm not going to be there.
Right.
But I also like being at church, so that's one of the reasons why
me
it's
as
hard
well.
to do. Yeah, it's hard to do. So I get that completely.
Sure.
It's worth having a conversation about with
Yeah.
the, you know, with the board and the members.
I mean, you might get some of the members who would
Right.
be willing to.
Right.
They have to be certified
Well,
or something to
not
do
all
that.
on
right?
Sunday.
I mean,
There's
yeah.
some on Saturday, but still, it is kind of. I mean,
Right.
It's hard. No, I get
it is hard because we have families, right? We want
Right.
we want to spend that
Understood.
time with our
exactly,
families.
Exactly. So, but you're right. We might have someone retired. If Bob is, I'm not sure, but we can always have that conversation and find out. At least see if there's interest in a midweek
Yeah.
class.
I mean,
you know,
there may not be.
or a Saturday only class.
Right. Right.
Yeah, Bob may be busy teaching other things. You know, Bob's a flight instructor down in Nashua.
I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely got some skills. That's
Wow.
pretty cool.
Yeah, he flies, he shoots, he teaches both.
I think that's great.
It is.
We have a number of really talented and very credentialed instructors at the club. So there's definitely quite a few classes that go on throughout the year. We try to keep them at a reasonable price so nobody, you know, we're not looking to make a killing on the class. We're looking to get more instructed shooters in
Sure.
the communities, people that are going to be safe. Because our goal is to promote the shooting sports, whether it's for sports
Yeah.
or self-defense. We want a safe shooting community.
Sure. I mean, that's great.
It's good for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. You
Right.
mentioned last time we were on about if you had a concealed carry permit in one or two states, it covered you for 37.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So
can we go over that? Because that's
we have two instructors, the other Bob. So we have two instructors named Bob,
Bob squared.
and
Yes.
so one of the Bobs and Al are
Utah.
concealed carry.
They flew to Utah and got certified
Get certified.
to do out-of-state training.
Okay.
So the two big states, if you get a concealed carry permit in Utah, or if you get a concealed permit in Florida,
Yep.
if you get either one of those and you combine it with a permit here in New Hampshire, which it's not required,
Right.
but if you want an
It's smart.
out-of-state privileges, then it's
you should get
smart,
it.
right? And it's only
Reciprocity requires you
it's,
have
Right.
it's literally
Oh, okay.
$10,
Right.
right? It costs
Yeah.
$10
Right.
to get your New Hampshire permit, so and it's good for 5 years.
And we're a shall issue state, which means that unless you are a felon, unless you are adjudicated mentally defective, my apologies for the terminology, but that's legally what it says,
Right.
where a judge has committed you to a mental institution, or you're a drug addicted person, if you can legally own a gun, they have to issue a concealed carry permit. It's not an option. They don't have no leeway in that.
That's
Right.
interesting.
Right.
So getting your New Hampshire permit, and you combine it with either your Florida or your Utah, it's 38 states now.
Okay.
And so I think there might be one more state if you got your Florida permit.
Is that what it is?
But
But you
Bob
can
and
carry
Al,
in Florida with a Utah permit, and
Right,
and
exactly.
Yeah.
so
combo.
Bob and Al flew to Utah to get certified to teach this class.
That's awesome.
Remotely.
taken it.
And,
It's- yeah.
and,
That's awesome.
and so I've taken it as well. And so it's good to have that. And then you combine that with the 28 states that currently are constitutional carry, just like New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, sure.
Right.
And South Carolina
Just
passed. It's not signed into law yet, but South Carolina
Wow,
is
that's
getting on
great.
board with that.
I'd like to see that nationwide, quite
Because-
honestly.
Oh,
Yeah,
it should
agreed.
be. But South Carolina was kind of a holdout, right?
Okay.
If I were to drive, and I spend a lot of time in Florida, if I were to drive from here to Florida, after I get through New York and New Jersey, I'm clear to carry in every state all the way down to Florida, except for
Except South
South Carolina.
So you literally have to stop, take it out of your car, put it in the back, unload it,
Yeah.
put it in the
And-
back, lock it up. Because federally, you can travel through any state as long as where you're coming from and where you're going to, you have
It's-
a legal right to have it.
Got it.
Right.
But you can't carry in those states like New Jersey, New York,
Right.
Massachusetts.
So South Carolina was a holdout, and it was another state that I used to spend a lot of time in because we had friends down there,
Sure.
and they've moved back to New Hampshire since. But the rule in South Carolina is they didn't recognize out-of-state permits,
Right.
so it didn't matter what state, including Utah,
Right.
that you had. And they didn't give out-of-state permits
That's tough.
unless you actually own real estate in South Carolina.
Okay.
So
Oh,
the
wow.
only people who are allowed to carry
Vacation home people.
in South Carolina are people who live in South Carolina as their primary residence, or if you own property there.
Okay.
And so it was kind of a holdup. But if South Carolina is going to become a
That'd be nice.
constitutional carry,
Right, it'd be a
then
non-issue.
I can drive to. It's
Right.
It kind of opens up the
And
rest of the
we should talk a
country
little bit about the federal law, where if you're traveling, you can legally travel. I've gone through Logan International Airport with a firearm in my bag. Now you can't carry that on.
Now that
would-
I won't do.
See,
Right.
I've done it.
I've done it
and
at
in and
Manchester
out.
because in the state of New Hampshire I'm good, but I am scared to death to take my
So
gun.
I didn't
to
take my favorite
Logan.
pistol, put it that way. I took a pistol that if I lost, I would be sad but not devastated. So I locked it up. I made sure the ammunition was separate.
Separate place.
In a manufacturer's box is one of the things you can travel with. And then when I went there, I talked to the nice people at the counter and I said, I need to declare I'm traveling with a firearm. They said, great, here's your, not a blink, nobody turned on the siren, filled out the form, they taped it to it. It was in a locked steel box inside my bag. And they taped it on top of that, nothing on the outside to make
To
it
make
obvious
sure.
that it's in there. And we close it up and you check
you
your bag.
check your bag.
You got to make sure, like one of the things we tell people never do, never travel with a range bag. Your range bag is for the range, because if you have one single bullet in there, you're not going to make your flight. You know, it's going to be, and God help you if you're in, you know, New Jersey and it's a hollow point, you're going to be staying a while.
Right.
So,
No, I found that it is much easier to fly with a firearm than I thought.
it is.
I mean,
They're very professional.
As long, yeah, and I fully expected. Oh, you're one of those. Stand
Not
over
at all.
here.
Not at all.
Wait for security.
But they
and
do-
they're like, no.
Different
Boom, done.
airports do handle it differently. There's some
They
where you
do-
have to
they
go.
do.
You have to go over and sit and be in that line. I think it was either Bob. I think Bob Panna was telling me that he had to go sit somewhere for 15 minutes to see if the TSA wanted to talk to him.
It's like a penalty box.
Yeah, they put him in the penalty box, 15 minutes, and then he was free to check his bag.
The longest I ever waited was at Orlando coming home. I had my bag, and they said, "Oh, you just need to, you know, have these guys." So I
Right.
walked over to these guys.
Right, exactly.
They took the bag. They ran it through the scanner. He turns around to me, gives me a thumbs up.
Yeah.
I'm good.
That's-
But that was the longest detour I ever had to make.
Right, right.
In Manchester, they're pretty good about
Yeah,
it.
I had a friend who's flown in and out of Logan before with it. That's the only reason I did it.
Yeah, I
And
didn't. I just traveling
don't-
from the state line to the airport is.
yeah.
It's still legal. It's federally
I understand.
protected.
I understand
Does
it's
that
legal,
mean they
but-
won't mess with you?
But
I probably
New
wouldn't
York
volunteer.
State Police have said outright that they will mess with you on purpose because they don't want you driving through the state, even if you've got it locked up in the trunk,
Right.
disassembled.
So here's a discussion. It's probably not a good idea to put firearm stickers on your car. I'm just saying. If you're
no,
gonna-
he's exactly right. You put an NRA sticker
No,
or anything like that.
I'm a fan.
That's
I'm a fan of the
interesting.
NRA. I'm a fan of Smith and Wesson and Ruger and
Yeah.
and Sig Sauer and Glock. But if I have those on my car, two things are going to happen. If I'm in a state, even if I'm carrying nothing,
They're gonna stop
I am a
you.
target. Now
You got
they
any
see
firearms in the car? You got
that.
any weapons in
Not
the car?
that you
sir?
know of. Now you know the dogs are going to come out. You're going to get searched. No. So I would not say that. Not that you know.
I wouldn't even take a picture of a gun through Massachusetts.
But you know what else is? If I'm a bad guy looking for a weapon, I'll break into the car with the stickers because that's much
you
more
go.
likely to have a weapon
Yep.
of some sort in that
Yeah,
car.
that's interesting.
So those are reasons that
Not to have it.
it's we can talk a little bit about open carry.
Yes.
Open carry is legal in New Hampshire.
Yep.
You can wear a gun on your hip.
Yep.
I've been in places where people are doing that. It's not always the best idea because if there is a bad guy and there's a bad situation going down, you are the first person getting shot.
Sure.
Because you're
From
armed.
behind.
Right, probably from behind.
Yeah.
Because they know that you have the potential to stop
Yeah, I
them.
mean that's the same way I felt at the State House when they said we voted on you're not allowed to have a gun in Reps Hall, right? Mm-hmm. So some of us did anyway, but
Was there consequences
we
in
didn't
the
talk
law?
about it,
Right.
So
You heard him? He said us. He didn't
Yes.
say them.
It's a wrap. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I understand.
but anyway, but
Don't ask, don't tell.
The thing that bothers me is that people will talk about them carrying and it's concealed. And I'm saying, don't do it for the exact
in this
reason
kind
you
of
just
in
said.
this kind of
Yeah.
forum, it's
Yep.
educational, so
Yep.
we want to be able to
Sure.
have the conversation. But once you're out of this forum, nobody should ever know
That you have one.
Right.
Yeah.
And-
I worked at a company for 20 years. For 20 years, not a single coworker had any clue.
right.
Not one clue, because you
don't
don't talk about it.
Exactly.
It's not for them.
That's the
Right.
smartest way.
Yeah,
That's,
because to your point, Vince, is that you'd be the first one shot if they knew
right.
you were carrying.
Why would I
the bad guy
advertise
comes.
that? Right.
As far as open carry,
Right.
I opened carry even when
People
I was
do
running
it, and
for office.
political reasons, people do it.
Yeah,
I get it.
because you
we
didn't
can.
want- that you can, and I feel comfortable with it. Don't
If I'm
worry
hunting,
about me. But
I
they
might
do.
open carry
Right.
from hunting.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
I don't want to have to take a chance I can't get to that if I need a backup.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I see people post pictures online, like on Facebook and whatnot. Somebody's sitting at a restaurant and they see somebody open carrying and they
In New Hampshire?
any place,
Okay.
right? And they take a little picture,
Yeah.
on the sly and say, "Oh, I don't feel safe in here. Would you feel safe eating in this restaurant.
I'd feel safer
And
because
I'd be
he's
looking
probably,
at it, I'm like, I'd sit right next to the guy.
Yeah, I'd drag up a
That's the
conversation.
safest place to be.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Right?
exactly.
You know,
I mean,
a
we've-
criminal is not going to be open carrying.
No.
If you see somebody open carrying, that
they're
person
not
is not a
likely-
mass murderer. That
Right,
person,
generally speaking.
That's
right,
Right.
right.
for the most part.
Right. I would, yeah.
No, you're right. I agree with you.
And it's statistically proven that people who do conceal carry are more law-abiding than even the police. They've looked at the statistics of the
Right.
people who conceal carry.
That's interesting.
And
they
we
hit-
are a
and they
very
hit their target
yes, we do
more
hit our
than
target.
police do.
Right. We tend to, you know.
That happens to be a statistic, and
That's
it's,
interesting. I
It's,
didn't realize
it's, well, you know, we were talking earlier about making sure you hit your target.
Right.
Well, statistically, there are a lot more police officers out there who are enter themselves into. Police officers are trained to insert themselves into bad situations.
Right, that's not
That's their
us.
job.
Domestic
right?
violence,
Right,
whatever.
right.
Conceal carry, we don't insert ourselves. We don't go looking for it.
Yeah,
and so statistically, they encounter these situations more often where they have to draw their weapon and have to pull the trigger.
Right.
Just because you draw your weapon, you don't have to pull your trigger. But,
Right.
but what happens
about
is
that, though.
statistically, they will miss their target more.
Really?
They'll be in higher stress situations.
they're in very stressful
with maybe
situations.
more than one opponent.
Right.
Right.
And
Right.
so they miss their target much more than people who have been forced to use their weapon in self-defense.
Now, we should talk about drawing your weapon because many times just the presence of a firearm will stop a crime.
Yeah.
Somebody seeing the Christian school that got shot up.
Yes.
Before they came to that school, they wanted to go to this person wanted to go to another school, but there was a sign out front saying our staff and faculty carry,
Yep.
and we'll use deadly force to protect our children. They drove by that school
Went to the next one.
and went to the next school where there
That's interesting.
was
Where
a
there's a sign that says no guns,
right.
gun-free zone,
right, which
That's-
didn't work so well.
kill zone.
No.
Right, exactly.
We call them kill zones.
But when you draw your firearm, depending upon what state you're in, so in New Hampshire, you can draw a firearm as long as I don't point it at anybody, and that is not considered brandishing. In Massachusetts, it is. Just showing a firearm
Wow.
is considered brandishing, and you go to jail for brandishing. That couple in St. Louis, who is outside their own home,
Yep.
the mob came by. The only thing they did wrong legally,
They were pointing.
they pointed their
Pointed at it.
guns
you
at
see the one
crowd.
picture, and she's
Right.
obviously not trained.
Right.
It's really too bad, but you could see that she was just holding her gun
Right.
like this with her
Right.
with
Yes.
her wrist
It's
up against-
terrible on several levels.
and she was just. It
Right.
was a really
Right.
bad situation,
Right.
but that's why they got in trouble. That's the big piece of it.
Hey, before we wrap up, I know we got a little bit of time. Can I talk a little bit about when this event's going to be?
Yes, let's talk
Yeah.
about when the event's going to be.
So May 18th is what we're scheduled for, and we'd like anybody who wants to or is thinking about buying a firearm, come down. We had a woman come up from Massachusetts, a friend of mine. She thought she was going to buy a Walther. She hated it. She ended up buying a car. So try the gun, not a car driver.
I know.
K-A-H-R, car. So try it, make sure it's comfortable, make sure you can pull the trigger without shaking like a leaf. All these things are important. You'll get to try this, try it before you buy an event.
And what time does it start?
So usually we'll start probably around 10 a.m. It's 1732
Lakeshore Road.
Lakeshore
Yep.
Road, that's where the club is.
Yep.
And come down, you'll meet some of the members. You'll get a chance to try some different firearms. We'll probably do some food and stuff there as well. There'll also be U.S. Law Shield will probably be there, which is concealed carry insurance, which is a whole nother show you guys may want to do.
What's the cost?
$10 per time you go in. So if you're going to go in, you might try 3 or 4 or 5 different firearms. You know, we figured anywhere from 3 to 5 rounds should get you comfortable enough to see if you would like to buy that firearm.
So it pays for the rounds.
Yeah,
Kinda.
the money
Really-
is just basically
yeah,
paying
not
for
really.
the-
We're donating the rounds too.
Sure.
So.
Right.
Sure.
So it just
It's a
kind of helps
service.
cover
That sounds
that
great.
cost.
Yeah, it really will be a lot of fun.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. And you brought